Well, this weekend we started a new series of studies we've entitled Do the Work. And if you've been watching the Olympics at all this week, then you have been watching people that know what it means to do the work. They know what it means to do the work, to show up every day in the gym or on the slopes or in the rink and whatever it is they need to do to prepare themselves for this one moment. We're watching the one moment, but there's years and years of doing the work day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, to bring them to this point. If you've been watching the Olympics this week, then you've also seen Scott Hamilton on TV again and again and again as he talks about ice skating. And so we thought as we started this series of Do the Work, it might be worth kind of reaching back into the past a couple of years to an interview that I actually did with Scott and listen to his story of doing the work and how God has been working in Scott's life. And as you listen to Scott's story, it's amazing how much it intersects with our stories and just understanding what it means to do the work and then trusting God in the midst of doing the work. And so Scott Hamilton, as he just talks about, God working in his life as he does the work. So a couple of years ago, when the Dallas Cowboys were in the midst of another losing season, one of a string of about 15 or 16 losing seasons in a row, I happened to make the statement in church that I was giving up on football, and I was actually turning my attention and my interest to men's figure skating, and decided why watch football when I can watch men's figure skating. So when I made that statement, a gentleman here at LCBC, Marlon Detweiler, actually happened to be in the gathering that morning, heard me make that comment, got on an airplane that afternoon to travel for business, and while he's sitting on the airplane, realized that sitting in front of him was Scott Hamilton. Scott, the Olympic skater, gold medal winner in men's figure skating. And so Marlon asked Scott if Scott would be willing to just kind of tape some comments on his phone, just to do a little quick video on his phone for me based on my comments about men's figure skating. And so this is what Scott actually said back to me.
Hi, David. I understand you're a big fan of male figure skating. Well, I also understand you're a Cowboy fan, and if you are, you only need to refresh yourself on Job. I would also remind you to refresh yourself on Luke 6:27 and 28. Have a nice day.
So my comments about men's figure skating and Scott's response back to me actually started a dialogue between Scott and myself and trying to work out a time when we could sit down together and actually share stories and for me to hear a little bit more about Scott's story and even men's figure skating. So I want to share with you some of that conversation, but before I do, I want to give you a little bit more of a synopsis of Scott's life. Scott's led a fascinating life, one with lots of ups and downs, with some deep lows and difficult times, and yet some incredible peaks and times of success. And so I want to share with you just a little bit of a synopsis of his life, and then fill you in, invite you into a conversation, crucial conversation maybe, but a conversation with Scott Hamilton. So watch this just to hear a little bit more about Scott's life and his story.
I don't think anyone's truly equipped to go out in front of 1 billion, 2 billion, 3 billion people on an Olympic stage, and you're scared out of your mind. On a 200 by 100 surface of ice, you wonder why you do this because you're so nervous. On 2 10-inch lengths of 1/4-inch wide steel, through this, just get me through this. And you're to manipulate those edges for 4.5 minutes and do triple jumps and athleticism and not make a mistake. It's impossible. But I found a way to be just good enough to win the gold medal. The more I look back on it, I think it's unbelievably awesome. Like, that was me. You know, I always thought if I could be really good on the ice, you know, I could become famous. I think I'm probably more known for my health problems now than I am for anything I ever did on skates. When I was very little, I suffered from a disease that stopped me from growing. It was in and out of hospitals for years, and I was never really home. And so what ended up happening was I came back from kind of being in and out of hospitals, and I ended up going to the skating club thing just by accident. And I found skating, which kind of took on a life of its own, and it progressed. And Pretty soon I'm competing, pretty soon I'm living away from home. All my role models and the people that were teaching me how to live day to day were older skaters. So there was a lot of it that was terrific, but a lot of it that really wasn't guiding me in any real direction. It wasn't until I suffered the devastation of my mother losing her battle to cancer that something was awakened in me. I knew I needed something more, something better. I think I needed to have some strength, and my mother was my source of strength. When she was living, I would disappoint her, but when she was gone, I just didn't ever want to be less than she thought I could be. I was happy to just work. I was happy to just entertain. I'd do well, and I think that was good enough. Skating had given me life as a child, and it had given me, kind of a strength as an adult. But what was about to happen really changed my life forever. Cancer, it put me into a phase of my life where I just needed to kind of sort it all out. I just survived something. Why? I survived something that took the most important person in my life off the planet. That was my mother. She died of cancer and I survived. What's my purpose now? What do I need to do? How do I? And a big part of that dust settling was getting with Tracy. And she brought me to the church. She took me to a minister, a man named Ken Durham. And the first thing he said to me, which was extraordinary, was he goes, you have to understand that Christianity is a faith of history. These things actually happened. And I go, okay, that's a good starting off point. And just study what has happened and see how that resonates in your own life. And it grew. It just sort of, it's like, okay, I get it. When you survive testicular cancer and you want to start a family, you don't know what the issues are going to be. And I prayed that I would someday become a father. Tracy and I, we got engaged and married. And then my son was born 9 months and 2 days after we got married. So I guess there was a plan there. I thought I paid my health dues when I had cancer, but this was a whole nother issue. I have a brain tumor. How do I tell my wife? And we have a 14-month-old son. How do I tell my wife that I have a brain tumor? I'd just gotten the news an hour before. I met them at the hotel, and she goes, what's going on? And I said, I have a brain tumor. And she took my hands, and without hesitation, she just started to pray. And it was in that moment I knew where I was going to put everything. My trust, my faith, everything. So the most powerful moment of my life. From that moment forward, we just said, whatever it is, whatever it takes, we'll face this. When they're gonna do a biopsy, they tell you, we're gonna drill a hole in your head, and then we're gonna take a needle down through your brain and take a piece of the tumor. They said, we seem to have found a safe corridor to do this. And I go, well, I'm not using most of it. But they tell you all the things that can go wrong in that surgery. And I remember waking up, and I looked at the clock, and it was 10:20. I knew where I was, And then the next thing I saw was my wife come in with a smile on her face. She said, they know what it is. And they found out that that brain tumor was one that I was born with, one that I'd had since birth, which inhibited my growth as a young child. That was the mysterious illness I had that they never diagnosed that got me into skating. Who would I be without a brain tumor? I'm 5'4". If I were 5'8", if I would have grown those years, 5'10", where would I be? Who would I be? I could choose to look at it as debilitating, could choose to focus on the suffering. I choose to look at that brain tumor as the greatest gift I could have gotten because it made everything else possible. I didn't see past it this time. I didn't think I would survive. One point I was starting to really feel weak. And one nurse in particular, I was up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I just was uncomfortable. And she was, can I get you anything? And I just said, no. I go, I'm just a little scared. She said, do you pray? I said, yes. And she said, what do you say when you pray? I go, well, I just thank God for all the blessings in my life. Do you ask him for anything? No. I just want him to know I'm grateful. I'm grateful. Well, who is God to you? And I said, well, I guess he's my father. Oh, you're a father, right? Yes. If one of your children were hurting, wouldn't you want him to come to you for comfort, strength? Yes. So I changed the way I pray now. I ask. Uninhibitedly, I ask. I ask to heal. I ask for strength. I ask for courage. I ask for another child. I want to talk about miracles. It's after surviving the pituitary brain tumor. It's impossible, practically impossible. I did 6 injections a week for 2 years. No luck. We're not meant to have another child. We gave that to God. A month later, we found out that Max was on his way. Miracle Max. When I look back and I see all those little moments in my life where I needed a great deal of strength, I understand that through a strong relationship with Jesus, you can endure anything. I've just learned that the only true disability in life is a bad attitude. God is there to guide you through the tough spots. God was there every single time. Every single time. My name is Scott Hamilton, and I am second.
Scott, very, very cool to be able to actually sit down and talk with you.
This is great. This will be fun.
And have been very, very impressed with your your modesty, with your relational side of.
I'm 5'4" and bald. I mean, come on, you know. So if you're not modest after that,
what else can you do?
Where do you start? Yeah.
Very impressed with also just your willingness to not only talk with us, but as I've observed you in a couple different settings now, your just relational side with other people as well. So thank you for doing this with us and being willing to talk with us.
Let's have some fun.
So would love to talk to you a little bit, Scott, about just life in general, your life. On one side, people who don't know all of your story, but would know enough to know an Olympic champion and a broadcaster and things like that, might say, oh, he's lived a very charmed life. And,
I have.
And so maybe charmed on one side, but there's another side to it as well. So describe your life. I mean, is it charmed? Is it?
It's definitely a roller coaster. And, you know, for a long time, I thought I was cursed because, you know, I went through this an extended period where something good would happen, and then something horrible would happen on the other side of it, and then something good would happen, and then something horrible would happen on the other side of it. And so I never really wanted good things to happen to me, because if it was something great, then something really devastating was coming right behind it.
I mean, let's start just kind of childhood. And some of your story there. Your story, if I understand it right, you were adopted when you were...
adopted at 6 weeks of age. Remember like it was yesterday. And, I was very small. And it got to a point where they realized when I was about 4 years old that I wasn't growing properly. I wasn't developing properly. And so I started going to hospitals to try to find the source of my problem. And my health was really deteriorating for a long time. And 4 years in and out of hospitals, test after test after.
Life-threatening even? Was it potentially life-threatening?
We were at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor Children's Hospital, and the doctor there said she couldn't see me go in 6 more months.
Really?
So we went to, when you get news like that, you say, thank you, it's time for us to move on, because we need better news than that. And so we went to Children's Hospital in Boston. And it was there that the doctor said, I can't figure this thing out. I know something's going on, but I don't know what it is. He goes, I'd recommend you go home and live a normal life. Just take them off all the diets, keep them on the supplements.
So not so much giving up on you, but just saying, we can't figure it out, so...
Like, just live. Go live. Yeah. Live the utmost. So at that point, I was on diets that kept me from ice cream and cake and all kinds of things. And so going back home from that hospital to birthday parties and kind of living a more normal life, going to school, that's where to give my parents a morning off from being so exhausted, I ended up going to the skating rink for the first time. And those are the first steps to something that would take me through a lot of really cool stuff.
So how quickly did you realize you had a talent or...
It wasn't so much that. It was kind of like, as being the smallest one in my class and the sick kid all the time, I was around a lot of other sick kids. So, being around well kids was kind of a unique experience for me. But skating around, after a few weeks and realizing that I was skating as well as the well kids, that was kind of powerful. Yeah. And then a few weeks later, I'm skating as well as the best athletes in my grade. And all of a sudden, you have a little jolt of self-esteem, and it's very powerful. And it becomes, now all of a sudden I'm growing and my legs are starting to develop, and my distended stomach, where I was malnutrition, that started to pull back, and all of a sudden I started to look like more of a normal child. And so there's no way in the world my parents are going to let me do anything else but skate. And it became my life then.
So you've been at home training all that time, but then actually had to move away from home to begin training.
I had to move to Illinois, where Janet Lynn and Gordy McKellen were both training, and it was a major training area. It was like really real training. I'd never been in real training before, so I didn't really know how to do it. And that year I made it to the Nationals for the first time. I didn't know how to compete. I knew how to skate just enough to get me to the Nationals, but I didn't know how to compete. I didn't know how to train really, and so.
It's like, how old were you then? Because it amazes me that you went from a 9-year-old skating for the very first time to being in the Olympics not all that long after that. And so even that event that you just described, how old would you have been at that point?
14.
So in 5 years, you went from skating the very first time to all of a sudden skating in front of 17,000 people.
Yeah.
Which is a big jump.
Well, and when Bowling Green at the time had a population of about 15,000. And where I skated in Illinois had a population of about 2,500. So, that's all the people I've ever seen in my whole life, all in one place. Yeah, yeah. And I succumbed to that. And the next year I went back to Nationals and pretty much.
So that event didn't defeat you, falling 5 times in front of everybody. It wasn't humiliating, or the point of thinking
it was humiliating, but I knew that it was. I was a skater. Yeah. I had to go figure out it. So I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna work harder. And next year I went back to Nationals and I came in 9th again. Every time I go to Nationals now to broadcast or be a part of the broadcast team, if I meet some of the novice skaters, I go, okay, who came in last? And the kid goes, I did. And it's like, congratulations. I go, it's all up from there, and I was last in novice 2 years in a row. It's okay. It's like, don't worry about it. It's just part of the whole thing. What made that 9th place finish so memorable was that was the last competition my mother would ever see me skate in. About 3 months later, she lost her battle to cancer, and I was leveled. She was the center of my universe. I wasn't gonna mourn her by crying myself to sleep every night or by lashing out. I was going to carry her with me. And so in that regard, every time I felt like quitting, she was there to kind of keep me honest. Every time I felt like training at a lower level, she was there to kind of inspire me to do better. And I went from 9th that year at the Nationals to 3rd the next year at the Nationals, and I ended up being ranked 11th in the world.
All of us have grown up watching any Olympian standing on the platform and the gold medal and the Star-Spangled Banner. And so
Yeah, I cried.
You remember that moment?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's honestly every single emotion you can think of. You know, you're really thrilled that this dream you dared to dream is actually now at this moment coming true. And then then you're broadsided by the guilt of you're up there with the whole world watching you while all the people that made that moment happen, they're sitting in the shadows, you know? And they deserve to be here as much as I do. And then you're thinking, well, who am I now? Everything I've ever lived in my life now is led up to this moment.
It's done.
And now you're looking over the edge of the podium and it's like a cliff. It's like, I don't know what to do with myself. What am I supposed to do with myself now? You know, I mean, this goal now it's met.
Yeah. Yeah, what's next? Yeah.
And then you're sad that, you know, that again, so much went into this and now it's over.
Yeah.
You know, you're sad.
Can I take you back to kind of just some of the health
Yeah.
struggles, challenges that you've been through? So in the midst of all the skating, then, and you talked about your mom and losing your mom to cancer, but you've had your own bouts with cancer.
Yeah, I had the childhood illness that stopped me from growing, which made me kind of a good height for skating. And then at the peak of my professional career, it was kind of like really in a great 11 years into Stars on Ice, and we were just, I mean, it was more than I ever thought it could be. 50 cities into a 60-city tour. I was having a lot of abdominal pain, and I went to an emergency room just to get some ulcer medicine because I worked really hard. I mean, I really worked hard when I was a professional skater, amateur skater. Whenever, as soon as my mom passed, I just became a workaholic. Yeah. And so, and the doctor, he said, we seem to have found a mass. And I remember thinking, no one's ever used the word mass in description of me before. And I thought maybe I had some intestinal blockage or something. And I'm thinking, oh, well, give me whatever. And he goes, no, it's either benign, malignant, or something else. And I was blown away. It was like, that's all cancer words, you know? And he goes, but if it were me, I'd take care of it right away. And I remember him saying that. And the fear just sort of got replaced with a sense of power and clarity of mission and focus. And I just, I was like, I got to roll up my sleeves. I got to get to work on this. And after the show, at night, I told the driver, I go, detour, we're going to Cleveland. We're not going to Dayton. And he goes, okay. So he drove me to Cleveland. Next morning, boom, 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 on the bus door. He took me to Cleveland Clinic. I had a biopsy that day. And the next day, they told me I had testicular cancer. So, another thing I learned from my mom was it's not kind of what you've got, it's how you deal with it. And my mom, when she was going through chemotherapy, she said things like, oh, I finally found a way to lose this weight. She said, oh, my hair, I'm so glad it's gone because now I can wear these wigs and it's so much easier. And then she said, I have no desire to smoke. I've wanted to quit smoking for the longest time, and now it's so easy. And I just thought, I want to do it that way. And so no one was allowed in my room unless they made me laugh. If anybody ever expressed any kind of sympathy for me, they weren't allowed to come back, until they figured it out. And they treated me like an 8-year-old.
Talk a little bit about Tracy, your wife.
Yeah. At that time, Stars on Ice was fundraising for St. Jude. Target House at St. Jude. And so we would do a thing in Memphis every year, and Danny Thomas's son, and I got to be pretty good friends through all our fundraising. And Tony had a couple of guests coming to the show that night. So I went up and I started talking to this girl, and just to, kind of check out what my friend was, doing. And I'm thinking, I talked to her for 10 minutes, and she was sweet. She had no ego. She was very intelligent, and she was very accessible. And I'm like, why can't I meet somebody like that? And it was a few months later, I was playing golf with Tony in LA, and he was on the phone constantly with this girl. And I go, is that the girl from Memphis? And he goes, no, Tracy? I go, I don't remember her name. I just remember she was kind of spectacular. And he said, no, we were just friends. She was just there as my guest. And it's like, oh. And he goes, it's funny you should ask about her. I think she's moving to LA like this week. It's like, really? Do you think I could get her number? He said, yeah, I can get your number. I don't have it on me, but like within a day or so of that golf match, my favorite caddy where I lived was near a golf course, and my favorite caddy named Jimmy, he goes, hey, man, how you doing? I go, good. And he goes, hey, my cousin was supposed to come tonight, but made other plans. I go, who's your cousin? He goes, Tracy, you met her in Memphis. And it was there that I really realized that, God was putting this woman directly in front of me. And I didn't realize it then in that way, but as we started developing a relationship, and she came to me and she just said, where are you with your faith? And I don't know if I said it this way, but I kind of said, well, where do you want me to be with my faith? I did not want to lose this girl. And she just said, well, I'm a believer. It's a huge part of my life. And I really feel strongly about our relationship, but I don't know what it will be unless we share those same beliefs.
Not long after having Aiden, your first son, then health becomes an issue again.
Yeah, I thought it was emotional, but I was having a hard time getting out of bed in the morning, and I was just feeling sluggish. And I kind of said, well, I'm one that tells men that if you're not feeling right, go see a doctor. I'm preaching it all the time. So I made an appointment the Friday before my cancer benefit in Cleveland. And I went that morning, and the doctor said, well, you're just getting older. That happens when you get older. And then I told him about one thing, and he goes, let's get a head scan just to make sure. So I went and I had a head scan, and the doctor that was in the operating room said, there is something in there, and your doctor will be waiting for you back at your eye exam. And I went back to the eye institute, and Dr. Klein, who operated on me for my testicular cancer, he said, you have a brain tumor. And I go, that's impossible, because I did my dues. I had cancer, and I paid my dues, and now I get to go in my life without any more incident. And he goes, we've got to deal with this. We don't know what it is. I told Tracy that day, and it was an extraordinary set of circumstances because she arrived, and I arrived at the hotel as they were arriving, and she goes, what's up? And I go, I'll tell you upstairs. And it was there that she knew something was wrong. And she looks at me and she goes, what's up? I go, I have a brain tumor. And she didn't hesitate 1 second, not even. She just took both my hands and she just started to pray. And it was the most powerful moment of my life. Because as much as we've been on this walk and as much as we've done all these things, that's the first place she went. She didn't go to, how could this happen? Or she didn't go to, it wasn't about that. It was about, let's go to the one place where this can be taken care of. And a week later, we just prayed every night. We just, our mantra was, it is what it is and whatever it takes. It is what it is and whatever it takes. A week later, they did a biopsy. They told me if the surgery went bad, I probably would lose speech, memory, motor function, all these horrible things that can happen. They have to tell you that stuff, right? So I'm sitting there and I'm wiggling my fingers and my toes. I knew where I was, who I was, why I was there. And I just went, test. Okay, I can speak. And Tracy came around the corner. She was smiling. And then they came around and they go, we know what it is. And I go, what is it? And they go, it's a craniopharyngioma. I go, what's a or I called it a lunatic pharyngioma back then. And they go, I go, no, we know how to treat it. It's cool. I go, now we have a course of action. And so they gave Tracy some information. She's reading it. She's like, oh, this is interesting. Listen to this. Craniopharyngiomas are usually found early in a child's life due to a lack of growth and development. It's like...
Sounded familiar to you. Huh?
Yeah, so I guess the motto there is if you live long enough, all questions will be answered. So I was born with this brain tumor, and that's what stopped me from growing. And that's what's, kind of put me in hospitals all those years. But back then, they didn't have the technology to find a pituitary brain tumor. And I just went back to life with, medical bracelet and, new medications, But we wanted another child. And when you have testicular cancer and then you have a pituitary brain tumor, fertility really isn't something, you're not going to depend on that. So I did everything I could. I met a lot of people. I self-injected once in the belly, once, 6 times a week I did these shots. And after 2 years of doing that, 6 days a week, I went to Tracy. I said, I don't think this is
not going to happen.
No, it's not. It appears that, and so we just decided to give it to God. She told me that she was expecting Aiden when she held up this piece of plastic, right? And I had no idea what it meant. And I'm looking over and I'm seeing this empty bag with this pregnancy kit. And she goes, it's positive. And my world started going away because it was the last thing I expected. So I picked up the bag. I'm breathing into the bag. And so after this exam with this doctor, all these years later, when we gave this, if we're having another baby to God, I opened up my PICS message and it was blurry. I couldn't tell what it was. And so I looked at the text underneath and it said, I hope you have a bag handy. Yeah. And that's how you find out that all that God was preparing me for was another child. And so the child comes out, umbilical cord wrapped around his neck. But the startling thing was that he had bright red hair. I did not see that one coming. So it was then I realized, being an adopted child, you don't know your heritage, right? And it was like, I'm Irish. And so, we were blessed with another child.
So Scott, going back to that idea of, people may look at your life and think, charmed life, but then you also said, but there were curses and charmed, whichever way you look at it. So watching God work in your life over the years and the whole thing of the tumor, the brain tumor, and yet your childhood and it being tied back into your childhood, describe how you've kind of seen God work in your life and some of the things that he's done in your life.
He was, I've seen it with a lot of people. And when you come from, where I came from and, you're the smallest kid in your class and you're sick and all these different things, you tend to kind of try to figure out people, trying to figure out where you fit in, where you belong. And I realized that throughout, from the very beginning, all the tough stuff was to prepare me for the challenge, that would come with trying to attain something more or something better. But it was just all this stuff that happened that made me stronger, and it made me more able to kind of understand that this too shall pass, So, just the childhood illness made me the right size, the right
So had the illness not been there, you wouldn't have had the size you
I
needed to
wouldn't
be.
have started skating. I mean, I don't know who I'd be or where I'd be without that. All of it throughout, cancer now allowed me to better understand what's in the community so I could better engage and I could better serve that community. And I got my street cred now, right? I know what chemotherapy is. I've had it. I know what radiation is. I've had it. I know what surgery is. I've had it. I know all this stuff. Well, I've been burdened with this or I've been blessed with this. I've been blessed with this because now I can help people through that are going through this that may be stumbling through it. I can give them user-friendly information. I can give them one-on-one support. I can use whatever God has given me as far as talent for skating or, respect within the community to kind of drive fundraising for research. So all of these things, you can look at them as horrific periods of that's so, or you can look at them as like, okay, I'm paying attention. Where do you want me now? There's not a person that's walking into your church that's not coming in with just a truckload of challenges and fears and their own sets of, just devastations.
Yeah. And what's cool about your story, and as you talk about people that walk into our church and any church, I suppose, every weekend, is just people like you that have had that burden side, that curse side of life, so to speak, as opposed to the charmed or the mixed together, but to see that God is working. What I love about your story of just realizing God is your Heavenly Father, and you can go and you can ask Him questions, and you can ask requests and say, heal me, or whatever it is that you're asking for, and just a cool perspective. There's a song that is real popular for us at our church right now called Good, Good Father, and it just basically talks about what a good father He is, and even the chorus of it is, you're perfect in all of your ways. And listening to your story and realizing, okay, doesn't look like, it was the perfect way to build somebody or to get you to where you are now, and yet God knew what He was doing, all the way through.
The main thing is, this is our e-ticket ride, going back to the old Disneyland days. This is our chance as this beautiful, perfect soul that God created to come in and just have this experience and just live it to the fullest. Yeah. Just take advantage of every moment. And it's hard, to kind of work your way out of the sludge that is kind of, what we kind of live in every day, with the negativity and all this stuff. But it's not a dress rehearsal. This is the real, this is the performance. This is it. Yeah. And so knowing that this is the performance, giving it 100%, and if I fall down in a performance, I'm getting right back up, because I'm not gonna let that destroy the rest of the performance. It's that part of the book too, Christy Yamaguchi. I saw her fall one night, and she got up and she went, ta-da, like nothing ever happened. It was like, wow, that was a second in a 4-minute program. 1 second of failure in a 4-minute program. Do we really have to allow the 4 minutes to be defined by that one failure? Yeah. I even forgot when she got up. I forgot it even happened. Mm-hmm. So if our life is going to be looked at like a 4-minute skating program, and we have a couple falls, don't let the falls determine let the quality of the performance really be, kind of the image of that performance, and not just, the failures.
Scott, thank you so much for the interview. Very much appreciate you. My admiration for you, my admiration for men's figure skating.
Yeah,
is going up.
You're the one.
The team is small right now.
You're a strong man to say that publicly. I like that.
But very much appreciate you and your spirit and how God's using you. And it'll be fun to watch and see what God continues to do in the future. So thanks for taking time with us. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Scott.
God bless.
As Scott said, this is our one and only life. This is your one and only life. And what I love about Scott's story is every time he would fall down, he would get back up. And what I love about Scott's story is that even though negative things would happen, things that we would look at and think, oh, these are going to ruin his life, these are going to take him down a destructive path, God took those situations, God stepped into each of those circumstances, and God made something amazing out of what seemed to be an incredibly negative experience. And your life. You may have experiences in your life, you may have situations in your life totally out of your control. You may be experiencing things in your life where you say, you know what, my life is done. There's no way my life is going to go anywhere positive in the future. You may have fallen down. And I would just tell you, in the midst of those times when you're laying on the ground, laying on the ice in Scott's situation, or when you find yourself in the hospital, or you find yourself in a situation where you just say, I don't think anything good can come out of this, understand you have a Heavenly Father. You and I have a Heavenly Father that's a good, good Father, and a Father that can take those negative situations, turn them into something amazing, where we can still experience life and life to the full, in spite of our falls, in spite of our shortcomings, in spite of the circumstances that are out of control. And maybe today is the time to just get up off the ice. Maybe today is the time to say, okay, God, I'm going to trust you, my Heavenly Father that can take negative things, perfect in all of your ways, ways that take negative things, turn them into something good, something profitable for each of us. So I just want to pray for each of us and just ask God to kind of help us understand. In the midst of the bad, He can make good. So let me pray for each of us. Heavenly Father, I just want to say thank you, first of all, for Scott's life, and just appreciate his story, appreciate the way that you have worked in his life, appreciate his honesty, his vulnerability, and just talking about the way that you've worked in his life and the way that he has grown because of the way that you've worked. And Father, I thank you for your love for Scott, and I thank you for your love for each and every one of us. That like Scott, we may have fallen, like Scott, we may have experienced things in our lives, may be experiencing it right now that to us seem out of control, to us seem like there's no good that could possibly come out of it. But Father, you're one that is able to step into any situation, and you could take that and turn it and use it towards our good and the good of others. And so, Father, may we experience that even today. In the midst of our dark times, in the midst of our struggles, may we experience your goodness. May we understand what a good Father you are. May we understand how much you love us. May we get up off the ice, and may you change our lives as we choose to continue to walk with you and follow you. And I pray it in Jesus' name, amen.